Hey everyone, my name's Jim. I'm going to run you through a detailed account of what it takes to make a paper mache pumpkin head for your Halloween haunt. The process is a very simplified thing once you learn all the details, tips, and tricks, and just uses some normal household items such as Elmer's glue, some acrylic paint, joint compound, and of course, plenty of newspaper. Alright everybody, this is what we're going to be making out of those items. This is the actual pumpkin head that we're going to produce during this tutorial, and I'm going to take you on a detailed account of what it took me to go from newspaper to this. And although it may look like a very laborious, complex, detailed item to produce, hopefully after watching this video, you're going to realize that it's a very easy thing to do. And the results that you get are just fantastic. You get that wow factor that makes it look like you spent a lot more time than you ever did to produce it. So, this is my first tutorial, so forgive me, but I do feel like I want to give back to the community, and I've taken so much from so many others and their time and effort that they've put into it to produce tutorials that I've been able to learn from. So hey, this is my gift back, and hopefully you too can take away some tips and hints and maybe see some products used in a way that you haven't before. So let's get started. In this video, we're going to focus on all the details and steps involved in making a paper mache jack-o'-lantern. Obviously, you could use these same steps for many other different applications and styles, just whatever your imagination can come up with, but primarily we're going to focus on the jack-o'-lantern. It seems to be what everybody is going for lately. A few of the things that you're going to need right away, there's some additional items that we'll cover as we get to those in those stages, but obviously you're going to need a lot of newspaper. Right away you're going to need some just regular white school glue. Doesn't matter what brand. You can find our Elmer's brand at Lowe's. They do sell it in the large jugs. Usually about $12, $13, probably depending on where you're at. You will need some type of container to utilize your glue, as well as a lid. That way all you have to do is seal it up. It's ready for you on your next day after everything's dried and you're ready for your second, third, fourth, fifth application. You don't have to keep remaking it and throwing it out. Gloves are always recommended. You've got hairy arms like I do. It's not a very fun thing to sit there and pick out dry glue out of them. It will come out, but I would highly recommend gloves. Still not going to prevent some of the hassle, but it's certainly going to help in the long run. And most importantly, you're going to need a trash bag. I prefer, this is just a normal kitchen size trash bag. You can use whatever size that you deem respectful, depending on what size pumpkin you want to make. I would highly recommend that you get a bag and use a bag that does have the handles built in, and you're going to see later on why that is. It serves two major purposes along the way, and it's going to make things a whole lot easier on yourself if you have them. So first thing to start with is taking your paper. It doesn't necessarily have to be the newspaper that you're going to use. Any type of stuffing material that you may come across that you may have, feel free to use it. It does not have to be the paper. Just happens to be what I have and have a lot of right now, so I'm going to utilize that, and we'll get started. Basically, anybody can do it. You've got kids, hey, they may enjoy doing this as well. Just crumple it up and start stuffing. It's going to take a while, so be patient. Unfortunately, with the paper mache, there is a lot of repetition, and I'm going to warn you straight up, it's not the most exciting thing that you can possibly be doing with your time, but I'm going to tell you what, the end result is so worth it, and you can do so much with it. I think it probably makes up for all of the monotony that goes along with it. So get started, start sprinkling up everything, start stuffing. I do want to take the time and thank a friend of mine, Mr. Spooky Blue. I don't know if you've heard of him. If you haven't, feel free to go to spookyblue.com. He's done a lot of paper mache projects. He's the one that actually taught me this technique. He held a class, got a lot out of it, and just kind of ran with it. I've got a few techniques that I've picked up along the way of my own, just from trial and error, and I plan on sharing that with you. A lot of the tutorials that I've seen don't seem to focus on some of the minute details that really can make or break this project, and I'm going to share those with you because it's certainly easier to learn from my mistakes than have to go through them yourself and get frustrated. So there's quite a few details involved that will change your world and make things so much easier. One thing you might find useful is a lot of these ads and all the junk mail that you're getting in with your newspaper. If you can utilize those for your stuffing, I don't tend to turn around and use this stuffing back for the paper mache itself just because it's too much trouble when you have to go to tear up the pieces because it's all wadded up. You can't use this stuff. It's no good for paper mache. You got to stick with just your normal brown or newsprint paper. So instead of throwing this stuff away right off the bat, you might as well utilize it for your stuffing. Save the good paper for your paper mache. Alright, this might be a good point to talk about one of the crucial elements here. Or as soon as you think you've got this bag ready and stuffed, the next step, you need to compress this thing as tight as you can, get as much air out of it as you possibly can. This is going to make or break how well your pumpkin head turns out. The more compressed you have this, and the tighter you can make this, the better. Then continue stuffing. Probably the other biggest advantage of doing paper mache and dealing with some of the monotony that goes along with it is there's really little to no cost associated with anything that you're going to make. Most everything you're going to make is going to be with newspaper. It could be a combination of different things. You can take bottles, what have you, to make forms with and then build off of it. So a lot of the stuff's going to be found objects. Main expense is going to be your glue, duct tape, and any of the specialty finishes that you may want to utilize, and we'll talk about those later, especially when you're talking about waterproofing. Alright, getting to a decent size here. Once you think you've gotten to the size pumpkin head you're looking for, as you saw, go ahead and compress as much air out of this as you possibly can. Get this as tight as you can. It's going to make things a lot easier for you as you move forward. Looks like I've gotten this pretty good. A little bit more air I can get forced out of this. Gather that top up. Go ahead and twist it around. Now you're ready to start making your pumpkin. What you want to do is get yourself some string, twine, doesn't matter what it is. I've got some tying twine. I've had this box for years and years now. I think I must have got myself a lifetime supply 10 years ago, and still pretty much full. So get yourself any type of twine or rope. This is what's going to actually get you your shape. Go ahead and tie it off at the top. Make things just a little bit easier. Doesn't have to be anything special. And what you're going to do, go ahead and get that piece out of the way. You're going to take your string. Take this. As you wrap it around, you're going to want to pull it as tight as you can. You can start to see where that's already creating that crease. It's mimicking the pumpkin. Bring it on around to where you started, keeping that as taut as you can. What I'll do at this point is I'll just go ahead and wrap it around that center a couple times just to keep it in place, keep the tension on it. Now we're going to come back around and we're going to go the opposite way. So essentially what we've done is we're cutting it in quarters. We've cut it in half, now we're coming back the other direction, cutting the pumpkin in half the other way. Pull on that as tight as we can. We really don't care how this thing turns out or what it looks like. That's how you make it as organic as you can. Doesn't look like it's uniform. Doesn't look like you made this thing up in geometry class or anything else. We'll keep this thing as funky and crazy as we can. Wrap that a couple more times around the center. Now, you can see that we've got it divided into quarters. Now we're just going to divide it again. Repeating, just pulling absolutely as hard as we can. Coming back around the other way. Fairly easy to do. Kind of looks magical to a lot of people when they see these things when they're done and go, oh my God, how in the world did you ever get that shape? And with this simple, easy step, it's not hard at all. First I'm going to wrap it around the center again. I'm going to find which direction I still need to cut it. Looks like we're going this way. Still keeping that as tight as you can. Go ahead and wrap it around this last time just so I can keep that tension on there. Make it a little bit easier trying to go to try to tie this thing off. Now, I'm try to tempt. Well, I see where that's gotten that, where I tied it around. I've got a real funky part going on here. I think that's going to be okay as long as it's tight enough. What it's done is when I wrapped it and I came back pulling, it's actually pulled it away. It's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world there at all. Found my leftover piece that I started with. I'll go ahead and get this tied off. Get yourself a really good knot because you want this thing to hold for the remainder of the project. Go ahead and snip this off. Go ahead and leave some. It's going to help you later on as well. So as you can see, we've got ourselves just kind of a funky looking pumpkin shape going on. Nothing uniform about it except for the fact that we divided it out. That's really the only thing that we've done that's made this in any type of uniform shape. One additional thing, I think I will go ahead and do that because I'm seeing where that's kind of loosened up a little bit, is on the bottom, you see where we've crisscrossed everywhere. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a string. See if I can show you that. I'm just going to run a string through all of those different points and I'm just going to tie it off. Get that wrapped around and make sure I capture all those. I just don't want them slipping as we go on to some of the next steps with this. Last thing I want, even though we got these grooves, last thing I want to do is have this thing absolutely, with all of the tension, pop off. So I'm just going to tie all those points off, make sure that they don't go anywhere. Clip this extra. Discard that. And might as well take your handle, pull them on out. This is going to help you later. Set that off to the side. Now it's the time to start making all of your paper mache strips. This, by far, to me, is the worst part of the project. There's nothing more boring than sitting here tearing paper. But it's probably one of the most crucial parts, because if you don't do this right, everything else is just going to suffer from here on out. A couple things to note, and these are some big hints. These are the little things I was telling you about that a lot of people just leave out when they do the tutorials. They just kind of show you, bam, here's your bag, and then next thing you know, they're slapping paper on it. It's not getting you anywhere, because there's a lot of little things that you're going to miss out on. Most important thing is you do not want these factory cut edges. It makes it extremely difficult when you're applying the paper mache to blend in the edges and to get them to stick. So one of the things I'll do is I'll take the paper, and a lot of the times because I get lazy and I get bored with it, is I'll take stacks of it and try to tear as much as I can. Fortunately, I can't tear a phone book in half, otherwise I think my life would be a little bit easier. But go ahead and grab it at the top. Typically, if you pull with it, you got the grain of the paper anyway, so it's going to make it really easy to tear. So tear it off, make sure you got a place to discard all that. Same thing goes for the fold. You don't want that fold. So go ahead and pull that off, tear it on down. What this is going to do after you've torn it off is, if you look at the paper real close, you're going to see where it's feathered it out and you got all this fine edge. Alright, what that's going to do after you've gotten your fine edges torn, it's going to give you a nice area to be able to apply it, let the glue grab to each other and let this blend in, and it's going to allow it to lay flat and stick very, very well. Unlike these factory edges, you're not going to get that. You're going to wonder why are all my pieces sticking up? How come I can't get it to adhere? You know, it's just going to drive yourself nuts. You also don't want, although it kind of works because it's not a factory cut edge, it does have this serrated edge along the top. A lot of the times I don't leave those either. I go ahead and tear it off. Those are a little bit of pain in the butt because it's not going with the grain of the paper, so it always leaves everything all torn. Not really a good way to do it. You'll find me later on leaving that edge, but that's just because I'm getting lazy with it. Now from here, you just want to tear your strips. So I'll go ahead and fold the paper back in half and just start tearing off strips. I'll even go back in this folded edge and I'll just go ahead and I'll tear those off and throw it, so that way it ends up leaving me with just all the individual pieces. You're going to want to do that, and you're going to want to do that over and over and over again. Again, make sure you tear your factory edges off. That one didn't come clean. I'll just start on the other edge. Come on back down. I'm going to go ahead and leave this serrated edge. It's just a pain in the butt otherwise. Trust me, it's a lot easier to deal with than the factory cut edges. Worst case, you can come back after you've already torn it, and kind of how I was tearing the folded edge, you can go ahead and tear that edge as well. It does make it a little bit easier just because it's smaller pieces to deal with than having to deal with one large piece of newspaper. I would suggest going ahead and tearing these fairly thin. You don't want anything real big and fat. It makes it real difficult to apply it. The smaller the piece, the better. I don't like to go too small just because it's that much more work you got to deal with in the long run. However, with pieces like this that are much larger, these long pieces work out just fine. If you're going to deal with a much smaller piece that's a lot more intricate, Last year I took some plastic skulls that I had, and I wanted to recreate those for a different prop that I was making. So I took saran wrap, wrapped it over the plastic skull, and just used paper mache, just put it right over the top of it, and got my skull face. Did have to use much smaller pieces, had to take these strips and just cut them and tear them up into tiny little pieces so that I could get it in and around all of the little intricate details of the skull. But with this, no biggie. If you're wondering, I do have a trash container back behind me that I'm throwing all this into. It also probably helps to go ahead and take your strips, and if you've got another container, just toss your strips into there as well. What that's going to do is later on you can just get your hands in, just kind of mix them all up, because they do kind of start to get stuck to each other. You can kind of fluff it and just kind of separate all the individual pieces. You are going to need a lot of this. So as soon as you think you have enough, do more. Just trust me, it won't be enough. The only good thing is you don't necessarily have to do all of this at one setting, because you do have to apply your first layer, let it completely dry, come back the next day, apply the second layer, third layer, fourth layer, depending on how many you're going to end up doing and what your ultimate outcome needs to be. Obviously, the more layers you put on, the thicker it is, the more sturdy it's going to be, and the more you can work with it, and the more it's going to hold up in the long run, especially if you're going to have this stuff outside. But in between those stages, you do have some downtime. So obviously you can take that time to tear up some of this. If you're sitting in front of the TV watching TV, really doesn't take or doesn't require much detail or attention to detail. So you could certainly sit there and watch TV and knock out a bunch of paper strips in a matter of no time. So don't feel like you guys sit here for a couple hours doing this and then wondering why the hell you ever started to begin with. Alright, that's probably, hopefully, enough to get our first layer on. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, knock that out of the way, so we can get started on making our first layer.